Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you to Radhika as well for joining. I read your book. I'm such a great fan. It's such a pleasure to be talking to you. Um, so I am Shahenda. I'm a student at the University of Wollongong in Dubai. I'm studying media. I am joined with my classmate Fatima, who's also studying media. My interests are feminism and literature, which I'm very excited to be speaking about as there are themes in Radhika's book, The Emancipation of Farzana Siddiqui. So I'll hand it over to Fatima before we start asking the questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fatima Omar, and I will be introducing, first of all, my co moderator, Shahenda. She is an Egyptian and Dubai born and raised. She is interested in filmmaking, literature, and uplifting powerful women. She loves to learn more about feminist authors and filmmakers, and she studies media and communication at University of Wollongong in Dubai with me, and she specializes in film production.
Great, it's a pleasure to meet you, Shahenda and Fatima. Assalamu alaikum.
Same here. Walaikum assalam.
Alaikum salam. So, Radhika, I think we're going to start by reading your bio, correct?
Yes, I will introduce Radhika to everyone. So, Radhika Maira Tabrez, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Okay, is an award winning writer, editor, coach, freelancer, and a motivational speaker. Her debut novel, In the Light of Darkness, won the coveted Muse India Satish Verma Young Writer Award. Her other books are The Emancipation of Farzana Siddiqui, Sankarak, Defiant Dreams, When They Spoke, Mock, Stalk and Quarrel, and Better Parenting. She is the first Indian to ever speak at a TEDx event in Bangladesh. She won the Rising Star India Award in 2017 and 100 Most Inspiring Artists by Indian Awaz in 2018. She was one of the program mentors for Achieving Writers series held in Penang, Malaysia in 2020, and she is also the former of Roots and Wings, a life skills enhancement program for children and adults. Her home is now split between Delhi, Dhaka, and Penang, where she has moved most recently in pursuit of a tranquil life away from the bustle of the big metropolis. She is currently brewing her third book, which she plans to commit to paper soon, while sitting on her balcony overlooking the turquoise water of Malacca Strait. Thank you.
Okay, so Radhika, just to repeat, I loved the book. I couldn't put it down while I was reading it. I'm a very big fan, and it's such a pleasure to be speaking to you. So my first question is, did you create the character of Farzana with someone in mind? Tell us where the inspiration of her character came from.
Okay, first of all, Shahenda, you're ever so kind. Thank you so much. I'm glad you like the book. And I wish my answer was any different, but regrettably, I didn't create Farzana out of thin air. It is unfortunately very closely related to a person I used to know a long time ago. In fact, the whole family is based on a family that we were very close to a while ago. And I think it was because I tried to speak out about what was happening to the real life Farzana, as we're going to call her for the rest of this conversation, that we got estranged. And I mean, it was a big part of what happened between us as a family. But what was immensely worse for me was this Farzana, of course, that's not her real name, and that's how I'm going to refer to in the conversation. This real Farzana was the one who got most infuriated with me when I tried to raise a voice against what was happening to her. It was baffling to me, and it was upsetting to me in a great part, because this was a girl I was quite close to, and hence I think there was a certain sort of emotional investment in her, because of which I thought I had the right to speak about this, elephant in the room of their lives. So yes, it is based on true people. It is based in a true setting. Purani Delhi is every bit a place that enchanting and yet confounding and sometimes even frustrating with its, with its mesh of old and new and bad and good and ugly and beautiful. It's a fascinating place. And if you're ever in India, I suggest that you visit that place. So of course, a lot of the story has been fictionalized, especially the ending, because Farzana's story, real life Farzana's story, didn't quite end that way. In fact, I believe it hasn't ended. It's stuck at the same point on the tangent where we parted ways, unfortunately. But I knew I had to fictionalize it in the hope that she gets to pick up the book sometime, or somebody else who needs that does, and they understand that there are options. There are always options. But I have to say, the real thrust behind the book was the realization that what Farzana truly needed to be emancipated from was her own limited understanding of her life and her rights, what she was capable of. She needed to be emancipated from this misapprehension that she was laboring under, that she's only of value to her family as long as she does what is expected of her, and that everyone else's needs and expectations and desire trump hers. And that problem is not limited just to Farzana. That applies to all of us women. In fact, I think it's been true for me at some points in my life. And my constant endeavor now is to make sure that never happens again. So I believe it's a very tough barrier to break for all of us. I think I was trying to break that vicariously in Farzana's story, because as women, we've been just deprioritized for so long that prioritizing ourselves doesn't come naturally to us, right? In fact, if we ever do it, it feels like we've been criminally selfish. And I wanted Farzana to know that it's not selfish, right? We just cannot bring ourselves to do something that's right for us. And I wanted Farzana to eventually get to that point, because that was her true emancipation. To know that it's not wrong to think of your happiness and your peace first. I'm hoping that happens by the end of the book.
That's actually like a very good point you raised, because I have a question about the end of the book, but I'll hand it over to Fatima before I ask you about that. So Fatima, the mic is yours.
Yes, that is a very true point that you made, and I agree with that, because I think that the only person limiting you is yourself, and you need to find yourself in order to succeed or do anything for that matter. And I had a question similar to Shahenda's, which was you told already that you had someone that was close to you that you got the character from. So why did you pick them? Like, why did you focus on that? Her. Why her?
I think writing stories is how writers make sense of what's happening around us, right? Writing essentially is how we interpret what's happening around us and try to take it to a logical conclusion that we can live with. If we can see that change manifesting in the world, it becomes a non-fiction column. If we cannot, it becomes a fictional story. But either which way, we're just trying to throw ideas out there. So I don't think I deliberately picked those people. I think the whole thing that happened with them just stayed with me. And I was on somewhere inside, it was causing some sort of a tumult that I wanted to deal with. And I said, this cannot end like that. There has to be a better way. So that's how the story came out. But also the fact that, like I said, the settings are a very powerful thrust when it comes to a story. If you're ever in that part of the world, you you will be overwhelmed with story ideas, and you'll be overwhelmed with the whole sense of the place, the smells, the colors, the sounds. There's a lot happening in that place, and you cannot think of a place that's which is that lively and not create stories. So it was a good mix of the place plus the people plus my partly my rage about what was happening to her and not being heard, and the story happened.
Great, great. That's amazing. I had another question, which was that in the time when Farzana's father left her mother, she was quite sad, right? And why do you think that people ignore mental health in Desi society, or they overlook that?
They do, and that is a fantastic question. Thank you for asking that, Fatima. And well, not just Desi society, mental health honestly is becoming an epidemic all over the world. Even in countries where you don't think these problems would exist. For example, New Zealand is one of the topmost country when it comes to suicide rates, and that's a problem they've been trying to deal with many years, and it is one of the highest in the developed world. So this problem is quite pervasive, but yeah, at the same time, developing countries and underdeveloped countries deal with them more often than as compared to developed countries. Why? Again, I think lack of education and awareness is definitely one of the biggest reasons. I unfortunately know of educated families where schizophrenia and bipolar disorders have gone undiagnosed because, well, the family they were willing to chalk it up to everything except the problem. There's a problem and they need to see a doctor and they need some medication. So it is evil eye and superstition and the kind of things that happen.
Black
We just
magic.
don't want to talk about black magic, right? The
Yeah.
easiest thing to do. Um, and if that is a condition with educated families, you can imagine what it would be in stratas which do not have access to education, which do not have access to, health awareness. So it becomes a complicated problem, but it gets further complicated for something like depression, like in Farzana's mother case, because all right, so a few years ago, for the first time, I openly wrote about dealing with high functioning depression for almost 2 decades now. It was a step that took me, it took a lot out of me. And I wanted to do it because I couldn't be advocating about mental health issues while trying to hide my own. And the first few questions that I received were not, are you okay? Or what can we do to help? The first few questions that I got were, are you sure you're not just sad about something that happened recently? 2 decades of my struggle and my suffering decimated and dismissed with one doubt. That's what we do to depression. That's what we do to a lot of mental health issues. Now, according to WHO, for example, 1 in every 7 mental health patients are in India. And it's a fact that we talk about every year in October when it's World Mental Health Day. But for the rest of the year, we completely forget about it. So the rest of the year, we want to call it sadness or boredom or drama or evil eye, or even the most cruel of it all, latest fad. Depression is the latest fad because Deepika Padukone is talking about it, so everybody's talking about it. It's criminal to look at it like that and to try to dismiss it like that. But why do we do it? Simply because we're a country of 1.3 billion people. And we have, less than 5,000 trained psychiatrists and less than 2,000 trained psychologists. We're just not capacitated to handle these problems. So we just choose to ignore it. It's a standard human defense. And also in developing and underdeveloping countries, people are juggling 100 balls a day. They're dealing with a broken social and political system, which gives rise to a zillion other problems. There is inflation, crime, unemployment, pollution, general despair. They don't have time to deal with something that they cannot see in a blood report or cannot see on an X-ray. It's not a broken bone that they cannot deny. They can easily deny it. So our standard modus operandi with something we don't want to deal with, just deny it's happening. Whether it's mental health or climate change, just say it doesn't exist and it will just go away. And that's unfortunately how 90% of people around us see mental health issues.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I totally agree with that, that it is in us to ignore a problem that we cannot face or that we don't have the guts to face. It's like a mechanism. We just do it like unintentionally.
Exactly.
And yes, I totally agree with that. And I think the only way to counteract that is by spreading awareness, or by telling your story or telling what happened to you or with someone related to you. And yeah, by sharing. That's how I think it should be. And
Absolutely. I mean, um, we have to understand, first of all, these things are not taboo. We have to talk about it. But also, you have to find power in the fact that when you would voice your story, 20 other stories would echo back. And you realize
exactly.
you're not alone in doing it. There's so many other people who are
Hmm.
struggling with the same thing. So you just have to get together and deal with it together.
Hmm. Yes, that's exactly right. And I will just hand it back to Shahenda to ask any other questions.
Okay, so Radhika, what a deep answer. I thoroughly enjoyed like listening to that. So back to the novel. I don't want to spoil too much, but I think I can safely say that the ending of the novel was like it had a happy ending, didn't it? So, as you said, like at the beginning, you said that Farzana finally got emancipated. And my question is, did you think of other endings to the novel that are maybe just as realistic, but are they're sadder or more tragic, or is this the only ending you thought of?
This was the original one. But when I sent my novel out to a couple of beta readers, they did come back to me with a little more uh, suggestion of a little more Bollywoodized ending, in the sense that you don't have to just forgive, you have to come back to the same thing, and everything has to be absolutely the way the story started. You accept the whole family back. So, again, trying not to get too many spoilers here, but when I was writing the ending, there was a couple of markers that were very important to me. And the
Mm,
first of them was, forgiving is not the same as forget. Forgiving is
yeah,
probably the noblest of the human virtues. So I did need Farzana to
agreed.
forgive our family, but forgetting is entirely different. And
Mm,
it's usually the root of all our problems, because I wanted to normalize that it's okay for somebody to hurt you. It's okay for you to walk away from those people. It's okay for you to spend some time away and then come back and forgive those people, but still keep some respectful distance to make sure that never happens again.
mm.
And
No, I
that's a
agree.
big line, right? And I think that's a big learning for all of us women, because we always forget that we have a right to keep that respectable distance to make sure we never hurt again.
Mm,
Um, the other thing that I wanted to highlight was that people transform, and once they've transformed, they don't necessarily go back and get into the same mood. So there's no way that she would go back to the same setup, same family, same Purani Delhi, and it was just not, it was just not possible. In fact, I love these lines by Cynthia Ocelli, and I'm sure you've read it because, or you've heard of it. They're so famous, but I'm just going to repeat them for you once, because they exactly define what I was trying to do with Farzana. So, for a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. So it did look like complete destruction to a couple of my beta readers, and they were like, "If the family is not back together at the end of it, how is it ending?" And I'm like, "Well, she's getting a new family because she is a new person." So
yeah.
right, so that was very important for me. But to answer your second part of the question, no, I didn't consider any sad ending, because going back to my first answer, I was writing this story to create a fictional happy ending, which I couldn't see happening in real life. So I needed to have that, light at the end of the tunnel, and it
Mm.
was sort of a Morse code that I was sending to the real life Farzana or other girls like that. So that Morse code had to carry a happy message that it's possible for you to break away. You just have to gather the courage once. So
It's
the
her
only
catharsis,
all
isn't
these
it? It's her catharsis, isn't it? The way she finally got emancipated, the way she finally got freed, and like you said, she's a new person with a new family.
absolutely. Again, I I'm like Tom Holland with spoilers, all right. So you tell me something, and I'm definitely going to see it along. So I'm trying very hard not to give you spoilers here, but it was important for me to accept that for her to accept and her to believe that she's worthy of being loved by a man, that she's worthy of creating a new family, a new life, and she is still going to keep on fulfilling her obligations towards her old family, but just doing as much as she can afford to do and not the rest does not make her a bad person. She had to be okay with it by the end of it, and that was very important to me.
Mm. Okay, thank you so much for your answer. Fatima has one more question for you. I hope
Yes.
we're not running out of time.
Are we?
I believe
No
we
idea.
are. I'm scheduled for the next session. So would you straightway want to jump into the excerpt?
Fatima, is that fine by you?
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine.
Okay, let's do it then. Let's read the excerpt.
Okay, but what I'll do is I will read the excerpt about the part that Fatima wanted to refer to in one of her questions. I do know that. So let me just quickly walk through that part, all right? Let me read the excerpt from somewhere there. Farzana was a wonderful woman, but that was the first problem with her candidature in the marriage market, that she wasn't a girl anymore. She was a 35-year-old woman, and no amount of Saba's expert makeup could hide that fact. Farzana never wanted to anyway. She wasn't ashamed of how she breached the acceptable age window for marriage because she had used those to rebuild a broken family. Her parents' separation came out of nowhere. Her father had got a new job in UAE and soon, as it turned out, a new wife too. He just made a call from thousands of miles away, uttered a horrifying word thrice, and snapped ties with his wife of 17 years and two children. Some promises were made of financial support as and when he would be in a position to provide it, a promise he rarely delivered on and no one held him to. The divorce completely destroyed her mother, who, like most married women in this country, had wrapped her life around her husband's. The stigma of being left for another woman ate her alive. Oh, she must have been a bad wife. If only she could have taken care of her body and beauty, you know what men need. She was always busy with the children, had no time to give to her husband. What could the poor chap do? The world found it easier to blame the victim, easier than the obligation to help her instead. Najma was shattered beyond hope. Farhad was barely 4 when all this happened. Farzana had no option but to step up and hold the fort, and she did an exemplary job of it. But if she had learned one thing during the last few years of groom hunting, it was that all her strength of character, her education, and her promising career held no real value in the wanted, tall, slim, beautiful, homely girl marriage market. What Farzana could offer to her potential life partner was still, in the understanding of the society at large, a gray area. She was confident, financially independent, and an emotionally strong woman. And while some parts of 21st century of India had started to recognize such attributes as worth celebrating in a woman, in the common parlance of the society, they had still not been officially termed as virtues. Because people still hadn't figured out where these educated and strong women would fit in the archaic social milieu. Purani Delhi was even further away from such revolutionary changes and outlook. People got their girls educated, well, because everyone else was doing it, but it came with a glass ceiling of a matriculate or, in case of the really liberal families, a graduate degree. Meanwhile, girls or women like Farzana remained an abstract, something which existed at the fringes of their realities, which everyone acknowledged, maybe even appreciated from a distance, but no one wanted to bring home as a daughter-in-law or a wife.
Wow, that was amazing.
It was, yeah, it's one of my favorite parts. So I think we have wrapped up our panel talk. I just want to say a huge thank you for Radhika for answering our questions about the book.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching.
It has been my pleasure completely girls. And thank you for taking out the time to read the book, first of all, to like it, and then to come up with such wonderful questions.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, everyone, for watching once again.
Thank
Thank you, Raj.